Yeah, I mean, there's so much to talk about. I mean, when you look back on your career, I mean, it's funny in the sense that um, you were you kind of came out of nowhere with a gimmick that Dusty Rhodes was the brainchild of, right? You were as far as
Absolutely.
and it basically changed your career. It was a very unique gimmick at the time. And I mean, it was almost comedic in the sense that like you were a Jewish kid playing Little Richard, and it was, it worked, and it got you into the middle of kind of, I don't know if the bidding war is the right term, but certainly, there was that period where I think both sides really wanted you. You ended up with WWE, and it changed your life in many different ways. And you look back, and it ended up, and then your life made a lot of other different turns. One of the things in the book that I was very interested in is like you kind of describe the idea or the feeling of, here you are, this guy who's been on TV with a lot of notoriety in WCW and WWF, and then you had to kind of like rebuild your life after wrestling and kind of deal with, a lot of people don't really talk about that subject, but dealing with life after that, just being a guy trying to just make a living, you end up, uh, teaching fitness and things like that. But mentally, it really, you really described how mentally it really got to you for a while there.
Dave, I think many wrestlers, when the lights go out and their career is over, it's really sad to see all the horror stories we've seen of guys that after wrestling ended, that we see a lot of guys that have surgeries and have to start GoFundMe because they never saved their money or they made bad choices or decisions with finances. And and I did the same thing. I went through some really hard times, and I remember having millions of dollars at one time, and then being down to just about nothing and having to get a job. And the only thing I really knew was fitness. So I got a job as a personal trainer at Gold's Gym. And I remember how humbling that was when people would come in and recognize me and said, "Oh my gosh, Marc Mero, what are you doing here?" And I'd say, I work here. And they'd go, "You work at Gold's Gym?" But
Yeah.
I can tell you, I really loved inspiring people. And then I opened up my own gym. And then I got this phone call from a Melbourne high school football coach wanted me to come and talk to his football players about not doing steroids and things like that because I was on TV a lot for the Chris Benoit thing back then. And I went and spoke to the football players, and unbeknownst to me, that coach called another school and said, "Hey, we had Marc Mero here, and he really did a good job." Well, that coach just said, "Hey, let him talk to the whole school." And Dave, it's been 18 years, an average of 230 events a year that I do now. It's like wrestling
Wow.
never stopped. And Dave, it's great because I still get to entertain people, but no one's hitting me over the head with a chair anymore. At least not yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, one of my favorite things about the book is it is an autobiography. It is not a self-help book. At least it is not built in that way. But you go through so many lessons that you learned about regret, about fame, about a lot of different things. And it does seem like the theme is to go, here are some of the things that I did incorrectly that maybe you can learn about. That's how it came across to me reading. Was that part of the strategy and how you wanted to write it?
Well, it really was designed to help other people because we all go through adversity in life. And I found that through our struggles, we can find our strength. And many people don't do that. They start getting depressed or fighting anxiety or, thoughts of not wanting to be here. And I'd been through all that and I got over all that. And I realized that through not only my faith, but strength and realizing, man, that the rest of my life will be the best of my life. See, I'll never retire, guys. I'll just refire. And that's what I did. After wrestling ended, I was thinking, what can I do with my life? I tried to become a personal trainer for a while. And then when I found this calling, being a speaker, an inspirational speaker at schools, churches, and corporations all over the world. I even spoke to kids at schools in Russia for a whole week, been to Guatemala speaking at schools, and it's just been incredible how it's taken off.
You know, was there, I mean, in the book you kind of talked about, and there's obviously, you went through a lot of unique experiences in the sense that, you were a wrestling star. You had a very high profile marriage, which obviously is in many ways, I would think, as far as a marriage goes, can be very difficult. Then it fell apart, and wrestling fell apart. So you were at rock bottom in many ways. Was it? Did you have help in like people who supported you to say, God, don't stop feeling sorry for yourself because that's not doing you any good? And was there like a moment, or was it a gradual thing of kind of like, rebounding from that, essentially from going like, I can't let this consume my life?
Well, I think, Dave, after my divorce, I really fell into some deep depression. Not only that, I got heavily back into drugs, making some bad choices, especially financially. When you get divorced, you split everything. But then my take was that I just started gambling a lot, and not only going to
Mm.
casinos, but I started day trading and just making horrible decisions, and almost didn't care. It was almost like, I think we get so used to making a lot of money that we always think we're going to keep making money. But when that gravy train ends, I was at the not only rock bottom, but I realized that rock bottom actually had a basement, and I found that too.
No, I mean, like, you were still relatively young. I mean, especially when you compare to some of the guys that are around now. But I mean, was there a thought of? I know that there wasn't a lot of high profile stuff for wrestlers, but you were still a wrestler with a name. I mean, was there just no opportunities, or were you just didn't want to be there, or just no money there? I mean, how did that? Because wrestlers never always you kind of fully left, and very few wrestlers actually fully left. They're always hanging on, doing indies and things like that, and you didn't really do a lot of that. You just kind of, the WWE run ended. I think you did some stuff with TNA, but not really that much. And then it was kind of
No.
like, yeah, the career was over.
Well, Dave, when you think about it, my last match, I was 46 years old. Remember, I didn't start wrestling until I was 31, and in a couple months, I turned 65. So, you
Oh
know,
wow.
I've had 14 surgeries. Total reconstruction, my knee, elbows, shoulders, open heart surgery. So I've been through enough trauma with my body that I just didn't want to keep putting myself through that. And fortunately, I don't have to, which is a blessing. And I see many guys that hang on because they still need the money, or they have to continue to do it, or they can't get over, not having the limelight anymore. And it's so sad to have seen guys that just keep hanging on and hanging on.
Uh, well, I mean, you and I became acquainted, right after the Chris Benoit situation,
Yeah.
2007. We were on Nancy Grace, it seemed like almost every night for about 6 weeks. And I mean, what kind of lessons did you learn? I mean, it was really an interesting. I mean, that whole period to me is like an incredible blur. It's like it was like this thing like kind of consumed my life, and it was a horrible thing. And I knew Chris, and so that made it even worse because it's like someone that I mean, not like friends, but did dinners with him and, hung out with him in Japan many times and even in the United States a little bit. And then he does this, and then you're kind of like, you're in the middle of this thing, and then everyone's using it. You know what I mean? And that's one of the things that I like from a wrestling standpoint. It was like we have to, figure out a way out of this. And they were just like, there's a lot of people who were really full of shit out there during that period. And what was what was your kind of take? Now you look back, it's 18 years ago. That's a long time of like the aftermath of that and being caught in that whirlwind.
Dave, it's kind of ironic you ask about that, because it's very sad that I can't even go to a WWE match unless, of course, I bought a ticket. But I have no relationship with the people that run it, and I don't know if, I guess I'm blackballed or whatever for speaking out years and years ago. But Dave, I think that if guys like myself and some other people that didn't speak out, things wouldn't have changed the way they did change. They have the best drug testing now. Every wrestler that's ever been in a WWF ring can now get free drug and alcohol rehab if they needed it. And those are things that they never had before. So you look at the good that came out of it, and we don't often see many wrestlers dying the way they did
Yeah,
back in
not
the
like they used to.
90s.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I think there's a lot of good that came out of it. And, but, of course, it's sad that I was vilified in so many ways, when I just wanted to do something good for the business. I wanted to speak out. Now, Dave, like you said, I knew Chris also. I mean, having dinners or wrestling with him or against him for many years. Uh, Great guy. I mean, people want to they want to make him the bad guy, and obviously what he did was horrible. But the Chris that you and I knew, we could never even phantom or imagine the tragedy that would happen eventually. So it's very hard to to know that a friend of ours that did something so tragic.
So horrible. And yeah, you're trying to rationalize it. And I mean, and you never get an answer. I mean, that's the other thing with it is like, I spent probably a year after that trying to like come up with the answer. And I guess the concussion thing is the best answer that I was able to come up with, as part of it. I mean, I'm sure there's many factors and that could get you to certain things, but it's at the end, the killing of the son. And I mean, I hate to bring that up, but I mean, it happened. Is like the one that I mean, I don't know, whatever. It leaves me speechless, I guess is the word.
I think that's the
Going
perfect word for it. Dave is speechless. It's just such a horrible tragedy, and it's hard to fathom ever doing something so horrible to a human being. And the thing was, many of us have had we've all had concussions. We've all had brain trauma. I remember finishing a match and not even remembering it. I was knocked out during the match, and so we've all gone through similar things that Chris went through, but I can't ever imagine going to that level of anger or whatever the thought was in his head.
Yeah. Going back to your career, I mean, I guess like the big transition in your active career is you were with Johnny B. Bad in WCW, doing really well. There was Hall and Nash had just. If I'm trying to get the timeline right, but I think Hall and Nash had gone first, right?
No, when I got to WWF, they were still there.
Okay, so it was,
Yeah,
but it was so
it
okay,
was
so
right when they were getting ready to leave. They already had the curtain call and all that, but they were still there.
okay, so
And
but yeah,
yeah,
so they were leaving.
I was just coming in while they were leaving.
Right. Okay. So, but the thing was that WWE or WWF at the time, they had lost or were technically losing key talent, and you were available as a free agent. Your WCW deal was ending, and I think Vince was looking to strike back with a young, new wrestler. And so you were in the middle of, both sides. And when you look back, I mean, it's such a transition in your life in hindsight of being Johnny B. Bad, that character, going to going to WWF with Vince McMahon, being one of the first guys, and I think the first of that era to actually get a guaranteed contract to make sure you went, because without it, you probably would have stayed with your guaranteed deal that you had, and I could be wrong. But what was going through your mind at that period? And when you look back, it's like that period, like completely in the long run, changed your life, your career, changed everything.
It did. At that time, I still had a big contract at WCW if I would have stayed. But Dave, I always wanted to go to the dance. And I always felt,
Yeah.
WWF was always number one and WCW was always number two. And the dance was WrestleMania. And I always dreamed of ending my career in the WWF. And I think Vince thinking he could get something somewhat like the Johnny B. Bad character. But because of all the lawsuits going back and forth and guys jumping ship, they're on one show that night and the same show the same night, the craziness that was happening. So Vince didn't want to take a chance. So when they brought me in to creative, I remember having this meeting with Vince and the creative team. And I came in and they have this new character for me. And Vince said to me, and I'll never forget this, he says, "What do you think of Wild Man Marc Mero?" And I thought, Wild Man. And he says, then he asked me, "Can you do a Tarzan yell?" Like, and I said, "Vince,
Who can do that? I don't know
yeah." I
anybody who
said,
can.
"I don't have a very strong voice. In fact, when I yell, it just crackles." And I said, "Am I from the jungle?" Like, I didn't even get it. I didn't get nothing. But I'm thinking, the creative, they made The Undertaker. They made all these famous wrestlers. I got to believe they know something I don't know. And of course, that's when I brought my ex-wife with me too. and Vince was not interested in having nothing to do with, other than she got the deal I got, Dave. I don't know if you remember that when Vince asked me what's it going to take to bring you to WWF, I said, Vince, there's a couple of things I need. And he said, what is it? I said, well, I need a guaranteed contract. He goes, all right. And then he asked me what I wanted. I told him, and I said, I want a signing bonus. And he asked me what I want. I told him, and he said, okay, is that it? I go, no, there's one more thing I need. And he goes, what's that? I go, I want my wife to fly everywhere I fly. He goes, I've never heard that before. And I go, well, if you agree to this and she goes with me, why don't we make her my valet? Because she'll be with me. He goes, oh, no. I'm worried about you right now. Let's just take care of you. And so when Vince flew me to Stanford to go over creative, he only sent me one plane ticket. So I called him up on his phone. And I go, hey, Vince, there's only one ticket here. He goes, how many do you need to sign a contract? I said, well, Vince, the agreement is my wife flies everywhere I fly. Because Dave, I was so worried about, we got married like 2 years before this. And I've seen so many guys go through divorce, being on the road all the time. I just thought this would be a great thing for our marriage if she was with me. So when we walk into creative, when Vince saw Rena, he looked up, he goes, I got to put her on TV. and that day Sable was born, which, obviously Wildman Marc Mero and Sable now are with the WWF. And, that's when the whole, the claws and the cat growl and all that came into play. And it was like, damn, I went from this, I'm so pretty, I'm a bad man, to this crazy guy from the jungle, So I never connected with it, Dave. And that's why I believe the audience has never really connected with it, because you got to really, you got to be into your character, man. And I don't even know what the character was really all about. So, and not blaming anybody. I mean, the greatest thing in life is I don't have regrets. Like, in other words, all the paths I took, good or bad, led me to right where I am today. And I couldn't be more blessed, happier in my life than having the life that I believe I was blessed with.
One of the really smart tricks in the book, I think, is Mark explains a scenario, and then in certain instances, the person he's actually talking about then writes a passage. And in one of these cases is Bischoff. So Mark talks about leaving WCW and the conversation that he had with Eric. And then Eric writes about what he remembers about that situation. And the memories are different. They're vastly different. But the other thing about it that I found fascinating is, again, when going back to sort of like, what are the messages of the book? Like forgiveness is a big thing in the book. Like, you're like, yeah, Bischoff and I didn't see eye to eye when I left, and he kind of badmouthed me, but that's like water under the bridge now. And that's a pretty powerful thing as well. Like, what did you think about Bischoff's version of that meeting and the end of your WCW run, and then your memory of that?
Well, I think when you listen to many wrestlers and their story that they share seems to be, there's always two sides of the story, and then there's the truth, the old saying. But, I just feel like in life, I never wanted to live with bitterness, resentment, and especially unforgiveness, man. You either forgive or you relive, man. And I don't want to relive moments in my life over and over again. But you know what? I respect Eric immensely. I have no beef with him. And I think when him and I get to really talk about this, which I'm going to be going on his podcast. I would really, and there may be things that I forgot that he'll remind me of, or maybe something that because we were very close. I mean, I would take his kids to Six Flags with my daughter, and we were very close at one time and had a great relationship. But when I left, it was very, it was a little bitter and stuff, and there was a lot of stuff said that I regret saying, and I'm sure he does too. But there's no animosity, and guys like Mick Foley wrote my book, and Mick, wrote some not so nice things about me in his book, and I love Mick Foley. I mean, every time I see him, I just give him a big hug. He just does so much for so many people, and we all say things or do things that maybe we look back and wish we didn't say it the way we did. And I know I'm guilty of it too. So I'm not pointing my fingers at anybody, man, but I'm just saying that it was nice to have people that did write my book that maybe I didn't always get along with. I was never a great friend of Lex Luger, and him and Diamond Dallas Page wrote my forward, and now we're great friends. And I just enjoy that, man. And you know what's funny, Dave, is when you go to like a wrestling convention and you see guys you didn't always get along with or didn't ever talk to in the business, you know, and then you see him and you walk up and man, it's just like giving a guy a big hug, man. We did
High school
something.
reunion.
Yeah, it's like we did something together that not many people in this world would ever do. And it's like we had this camaraderie that's unbreakable that nobody could take away from us. So whenever I see someone I didn't like, oh gosh, the one guy I couldn't stand back then was Bradshaw. I just loathed that guy, you know. He was just such a bully, you know. And I got to fight him in the brawl for all. But I got to tell you, man, seeing the things he does now, and I've written to him, he's written to me, and I'm so proud of the person he is today. And I know he is the same with me, that with things that I do. And I can't wait to see him again. But back then, we just didn't like each other.
One more quick thing about the guaranteed contract thing, because you did write about how the reception you got from the locker room was jealousy and sort of target on
Oh
your
yeah.
and
Especially
including in Mick's book, and you didn't sort of understand why. And in thinking back, like the locker room should have been happy that had happened, because then that's what they could negotiate into their deals, would be what I assume. But why do you think that wasn't the reaction to you getting a guaranteed contract?
Well, the funny thing was, Garrett, is I didn't even really realize it back then. You know, I didn't even think about it. I didn't realize that I was so disliked, you know, but then I could look back now and see totally why. You know, I broke the glass ceiling. I was the first one to get that guaranteed contract that
but
opened the door to everybody.
that's a good thing though.
It is, but at the time, these guys are still
Yeah.
getting paid on opportunity. Whether we draw well on the house show, and I'm getting this big, you know, at the time I think it was like 350,000 plus a signing bonus. You know, where I'm making all this money. We're in the house shows. We're not doing real well at that time. Where we're only getting a couple thousand people, and they're getting paid based on what we're drawing there. So it was very difficult on a lot of guys. Remember, right before I came, Mick Foley and Steve Austin signed before I did, and they were given just the so-called opportunity. And so there was a lot of dislike. And I remember how hard it was working with guys or trying to get, like at WCW, I had the camaraderie of the guys. I'm with the guys on the road. I'm traveling with the guys, going out to the bar or hanging out with the guys. And now I'm just with my wife. And I'm only with my wife. We're sitting at the catering table together. We're driving together. We're always together. We're working out together. So I didn't have that relationship I had with the guys that I had with WCW. So I could see where a lot of them could think that we're aloof or we're, you know, because I'm just with my wife. I can't just go hang out with the guys and go drink with the guys. So it was different. I can look back now and see why I was not very well liked there, and which is really was really hard for me because I've always been a really likable person. I love people, man. I really an outgoing person, and when I was there, I remember how hard it was to work with guys. You know, I'll give you an example, guys. I remember wrestling Ahmed Johnson, and one of the moves I do is pick you up and spin you into like a TKO, and if you every wrestler you work with will go with you, or but if a guy doesn't want to go, I don't care if you're 170 pounds, if you just dead weight them, it's gonna be hard to pick up somebody. Ahmed Johnson's a big guy, but like I would wrestle Rikishi when he was the Sultan and pick him up like he was a feather because he would go, man, and then spin him into a TKO. But I remember trying to pick up Ahmed Johnson, and he would not go. And it makes you look weak. It looks like you're just not strong enough. If some guys want to go. I remember how embarrassing that was to not be able to pick him up or him not allowing me to pick him up. And but there was many instances like that when wrestling someone, I don't even want to mention their name, but threw him off and hit him with a tackle. And what they did is they fell like a tree, like real slow. And I hit the ropes to come up for the next move, and they're not even already fall, where they have to drop down. It just made it look so bad. It was so hard to work with guys, and it would happen over and over. And I just realized that I was not well liked there.
From a stylistic standpoint, going from WCW, which was always quicker, I think. I mean, you could kind of describe the difference, but there's a difference between what they did in WCW and what they did in WWF. I mean, it was little different rings, of course, but just a different style. And then when guys would come in, you have to learn to adapt to the style. And it did it throw you off at all? And was it, like you said, like there's a difficulty, and then you kind of get this thing because you were trained one way, and now you're going to someone who wants it completely different, and you've only been trained one way, and then you get the tag of he was overrated there. You know what I mean? When it's just really a different style that you have to learn.
The WCW ring was much smaller and it had steel cables, which didn't have that real like loose feeling on it, And so going to WWF, it was different running the ropes and of course climbing to the top rope was very loose and bouncy. You'd want them to really tighten up the ropes a lot. But the styles were so different, and it was. I think when I came there, people treated me like I didn't even know how to wrestle, and it was really embarrassing because I did have some really good matches at WCW. I mean, Brian Pillman Fall Brawl, Steve Austin with many of the matches we had for the U.S. title. I had some really good ones. So when I came to WWF, I was thinking, man, I can't wait to work with like a Shawn Michaels or work with Triple H and guys that even Triple H I worked with at WCW many times. But like I said, I just have no bitterness about it. But I know it was just a difficult time in my life. And when it was time to go, it was time to go. I had 3 years left on my guaranteed contract. I just signed a brand new deal for the same big money, and I was going to stay there for 3 more years. And then that's when my ex-wife had the lawsuit against them, and I had to leave with her. So I lost out on that, but I wanted to support her, and I was all for supporting her at the time.
When you go back, because your break comes when Dusty Rhodes comes up with this idea, and I don't even, like where he got it from. I don't know if he even told you. I don't even know. Like all of a sudden you're on TV with this really colorful gimmick, and you're an inexperienced guy, and you're kind of thrown out there with a gimmick that's very noticeable and everything. And you had success with it. What was it like to did you embrace the gimmick? Because I know in the book when you first were told, you were kind of like, what is this? But you went with it.
Well, Dave, when you're making $23,000 a year digging swim pools, they offer you a 6-figure contract. You say, well, what kind of lipstick do you want me to wear? So, no, but when Dusty Rhodes first told me about it, he said, hey, kid, did anybody ever tell you you look like Little Richard? And I thought he was talking about a wrestler. So I said, I never heard of Little Richard. And he said, you don't know Little Richard? I go, oh, the singer? I go, yeah, no one ever told me that. He goes, oh, I can do it for you. But Dave, you may not even know this. And I just recently shared this, though. When Dusty Rhodes came up with the character, he said, now, this is what we're going to call you. What do you think of Precious? I go, Precious? I'm thinking myself, I'm a former Golden Glove boxer, played football, hockey, and all the people that knew me my whole life as a tough kid. I'm gonna be called Precious. And Dave, I went home that evening, and I was just thinking of Little Richard back in that era, songs and stuff. And I thought, oh man, Chuck Berry had this song, Johnny Be Good. And I thought, and Dallas was doing this thing with the Freebirds, like a B-A-double-D. So I called Dallas and said, hey, could I use that bad? I told him Johnny Be Bad. So when I saw Dusty, I go, Dusty, I know you like that name Precious, but what do you think of Johnny B. Bad, spelled B-A-D-D? And he goes, I like it. I go, thank you, Lord. Otherwise, I would be known as Precious my whole life, man.
Well, how did you even, I don't know if you had any sort of background in theater, entertainment, or whatever, but how did you go about mimicking Little Richard? Did you watch stuff on him, or did you just know him very well?
No, I didn't know him at all. And this is what's so great about this is that the greatest memories I have from being a professional wrestler was that Dusty would always be at the arena early with me, and he'd help me become this character. And you know how flamboyant Dusty Rhodes is. He was just walk up and he'd just walk in. He goes, "I want you to say I'm a bad man," and he'd be really over the top with it. And then remember the first time I got introduced, I had to walk up to the microphone and said, "I'm so pretty. I should have been born a little girl." And Dusty would do this for me. Him and I would get laughing so hard. I go, "Dusty, I can't do that." He goes, "Yes, you can. Yes, you can." And he'd work with me on it. And my gosh, those are some of the greatest memories because we get laughing so hard and we have so much fun. When we come up with all the, "I'll kick your booty with my tutti frutti. I'm so outrageous, it's contagious. I don't sit down, I get down." And we just come up with all these, sayings and making the character fun. But being I grew up Jewish, and I'm a Christian now. I converted, but growing up in the Jewish community and stuff, and my dad being a Jew from Brooklyn, New York. My dad talked like this. He said, "Mark, here's $1," And when Dusty first told me about, when I went to the CNN Center. Now, my dad were estranged for many years. First of all, leaving the faith, but also my drug abuse and everything I was going through at the time. My dad and I were estranged, and I remember Dusty telling me about, bringing me to Center State or to the CNN Center to sign my contract. And I was sitting in the waiting room, and Janie Engel calls me and says, "Dusty, we'll see you now." And I go into Dusty's office, and he's on the phone in a really deep conversation. And I'm just standing there at his desk, and he goes, "Hold on." He goes, "Hey, kid, here's a contract. Have your attorney look it over and get back to me." He gets back on the phone. Now, like I said, Dave, I'm making $23,000 digging swim pools, right? And I look at this contract and I see first year 75,000 plus royalties and pay-per-view and blah, blah, blah. So it's really six figures, right? Then the second year it doubles. So I just said, "Hey, excuse me, Dusty?" And he goes, and now he's perturbed. He goes, "What?" I go, "Can I just sign this? I don't even have an attorney." And he goes, "Welcome to WCW." So, Dave, I'm so excited because I finally made it in life, so to speak. So I got to call my best friend, my dad, who hasn't spoken to me in a while and kind of estranged, and back then in 1991, when you made a collect phone call, you call the operator and it said, "Collect call from," and then you say your name. Do you remember that back in the day? So I call my dad, and Dave, there's a few things you don't do in life. Okay, and the old saying, you don't spit in the wind, you don't tug on Superman's cape, and you don't call a Jew collect. Okay, so I call my Jewish dad, and they said, "Collect call from." I said, "Dad, don't hang up. It's an emergency." He goes, "Okay." He goes, "Mark, what's going on?" I go, "Dad, you're not going to believe this. I'm at the CNN Center, and I just got a contract for wrestling. It's a six-figure contract." And the phone goes silent. And my dad goes, "Mark, I always knew someday my son was going to make it." And he goes, "What do they got you doing?" I go, "Well, Dad, they got me doing this Little Richard gimmick." He goes, "Little Richard? Isn't that gay schwarzer?" I go, "Yeah, but Dad, they're paying me six figures." He goes, "Oh, Mark, I always liked that Little Richard." So, hey, Dave, now fast forward to my debut, right? My dad, who's a detective, right, has all his friends that are police officers. They're all at his house to
Oh,
watch
geez.
the show, right? Now, remember, these are the same people who would come to my boxing match and see me knocking guys out, right? Now they're at my dad's house. They're all waiting for me to come out. And Dave, I come out with this feather boa, purple feather boa. I got my face all painted up, lipstick, eyeliner. My hair's all done up, right? And that tutti fruity music is playing. And I walk out, my dad tells me this later on. He goes, the room was silent. And I walk up to the microphone. That's when I had to say, "I'm so pretty, I shouldn't board a little girl." And they all look at my father and he goes, "Hey, Vay, at least he's making good money."
Can we hang out in 1991 for a second? Because my pro wrestling fandom was probably like, as a fan, before I found Dave, really, is like I'm at this cross section of like I'm just watching as much as I possibly can, and then I find Dave's writings, and so it's almost like this aha moment about what wrestling really is. And so 1991 is very memorable to me because of that, but also Dusty's bringing in all of these kind of WWF like gimmicks. So you
Mhm.
come in, Big Josh, PN News, the Diamond Stud, Oz, and you could see very early on that you kind of embraced it, but someone like PN News was kind of like that just was not what he was comfortable. Like he couldn't rap, obviously. They didn't really, they didn't. I don't know who wrote those rhymes, but that was not a comfortable thing for him. But you look at like the Diamond Stud is kind of like a predecessor to what Razor Ramon becomes, like some similarities. Oz, that what was Oz to what Kevin Nash became, but
Nothing.
what like you're given sort of a similar template of like this kind of thrown together thing where it doesn't really suit what you do or where you come from. But why do you think you were able to embrace it and succeed with it, and then others were not able to?
Well, one of the things I did is that the greatest investment you can make is in yourself. And what I did, even though wrestling standards, I wasn't making huge money, but I was making good money. So I started buying. I found Sandra Gray, who was one of the top seamstresses in the industry now. But I was her first client, and
Really?
she made all she did back then was she made clothes for little girls that dance. And we put an ad in the paper to find a seamstress, and she answered it. And I told her what I do. I wrestle, so we started coming up with these extravagant costumes. I mean, those big capes that I would wear, and all the garters and all those crazy stuff that I had on. She made that, and we designed them over and over again. So I invested all this money into it, and of course, then I came up with the Bad Blaster. The Velcro kiss is the kiss that don't miss. You know, and the throwing the frisbees out with my name on it, and out of the Bad Blaster on TV, we would shoot real money. But then when I go to house shows, I'd have fake money that says "In Johnny We Trust." So I had a lot of fun. I just started having a lot of fun with the gimmick, and I think that people could see that I was having fun. So that's why they turned me babyface quite a bit. I would think I was maybe 6 months as a real heel, and then they turned me right away into a babyface because the fans started really getting behind the whole entrance, and me and Teddy dancing together. Then he'd hold the hand mitts up, and I'd do the 1, 2, 3 and punch the hand mitt off him. And so we had a lot of fun, and people could see you having fun. They have fun.
Um, one of the things in the book is you do kind of detail the marriage, the marriage breakup, and I mean, I'm under the impression, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you and her are cordial, and you do get along, and you have there's kids involved and everything like that. Um, how hard? I mean, as a writer or as someone who's writing the book, how hard was it? Because there's a line like, you went through it, you kind of explained a lot of it, but at the same time, it's like this is someone who you deal with on a regular basis.
It was one of the hardest things that I've ever went through. Any guy that loses their loved one, or their wife, or go through a divorce, or if there's infidelity in a marriage, or whatever, it's one of the hardest things you can go through, and it really spiraled me out of control as far as my emotions, the life I was living. And because when I found out about it, she moved out right away. Like, she was gone, and took our daughter with her. And it was like, here I am in this beautiful home. We had streams made into a big fountain, and 5 acres, tennis court, basketball court. We got this beautiful, and I'm all by myself. I mean, I remember walking like from room to room and just remembering having memories in each room, and going through some really difficult times. But the reason why I wanted to share it is that I know that so many men, women go through these emotions of losing somebody, and I was able to get through it, get over it. And I got to tell you guys, and I write this in my book, if there's ever 2 words I'd ever say to my ex-wife, is thank you. I never would have known this amazing life I have if it wasn't for her leaving me. I never would have been an inspirational speaker. I never would have changed and saved so many lives out there. And the peace I have, I've never touched the drug since 2003. And so it was like changing my whole life. And I don't know, I absolutely wish her the best. I know her and Brock got kids, and they're living an incredible life, and I couldn't be happier for them. But I just want to share my truth of what I went through and how difficult it was to go through that and get over it, and then put it behind you, because I have, no animosity, no regrets, no bitterness or resentment for anything that happened.
That I thought, out of all the things that you wrote about, that was probably the most courageous thing to write about. And I'm sure when people grab your book, if they're going to skip to something, they're going to skip to that part because they want to know, they've heard stories. They want to know your thoughts on it. And I think I may have been 29 when I got divorced, 2 young kids. And so I understand that point of it, but it's one thing to share this story with your friends. It's one thing to open up to other people who may be considering divorce or maybe going through counseling because you can help them. It is a whole other thing to write it on a book that has your name on it that anybody can pick up and read. Like, what was that? Was that a cathartic thing for you as you're writing it? Was it just part of the story? Like, how did you feel as you were writing it? And then when you were done and it just becomes part of your story, like, how'd you feel after that?
I really believe it's part of therapy, that when you can talk about something, when I'm on stage every day at schools, it's like therapy for me, like the greatest joy I have in life is helping another person. And I just remember that, by speaking about it, because when you hold things inside, like depression, anxiety, trauma that you've gone through, when you hold it inside and you don't talk about it, it's like a volcano. And sooner or later, that volcano erupts, and it often erupts in negative behavior, could lead to horrible bouts of depression, constantly reliving those emotions, could lead to stress, or could lead to hurting other people, or never having healthy relationships. And that's what I didn't want that to happen to me. And I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to get it off my chest. And I did, and I'm glad I did. I mean, I know someday probably Rena will read it, and she may have a whole different point of view, just like me and Eric have different thoughts on different things. But when you break up a marriage, there's always different views on things that happened. And would I'd welcome her sharing her story. I don't think she ever will, but I'd welcome it. I have a daughter that I absolutely adore. That we have a daughter that I adopted, Mariah, when she was 5 years old, and she's just, and I never want to say anything that would hurt her. So there were certain things in the book I wanted to leave out, that because I don't want to hurt people.
When you go through kind of like the situation, because here you are, she was a really big star for a period of time there in WWE, all over television and everything, and then that's even a weird thing because you're very religious, but you're making so much money doing this. So I'm sure that there's like, internal conflicts between money and this and going to church and all that. So you have that thing to deal with. Then you're gone. She had her falling out with them. You're gone with her. You're out of there. And then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, um, she wants back, and she actually, based on what you said, like, had talked to them without actually even talking to you first. It's kind of like she brings it up to you, and it's like, oh, I've already talked to them. I can go back. You thinking maybe, you sued them. Are they going to take you back? And then of course they did easily, because that's the nature of Vince McMahon. If he can make money with you, he will. There's the two things with Vince. Number one, if he can make money with you, he will do it. And number two, I think he loves that people who he had falling out with want to come back. You know what I mean? I think he really gets off on that. I think that if I've seen it with people who I know that were always that were fired by Vince, and they would never say anything bad about Vince. Like Bobby Heenan, I'm just a perfect example. Okay. Never, like Eric wanted him to bury Vince, like he wanted everyone to do. Bobby, no, I made money with him. I will never bury him. Then, WCW goes down, and all those guys who buried Vince, they're going back with Vince. Vince never called Bobby back, except for like an appearance here and there. And Bobby would always go, "Why not?" He even took Brett, you know what I mean, who buried Vince more than anyone. And I just remember it's just like, because you were in a challenge. It was a challenge. Vince, I always knew that Vince would never give up trying to get Bret Hart back. The more Bret said, the more Vince is going to want him back. Now, and Sable, Rena sued them. It was a very highly publicized suit. And anyway, he brings her back with the push and everything like that. And so all this goes down. And I mean, did you like when the thing is going down? I mean, are you having like little things in your head, or is it just the thing where you hear the answering machine and it's like, oh my, for people who don't know, you were basically played the answering machine message. You heard a guy's voice, and you heard the conversation. It was just like, oh my God, I'm being cheated on, essentially. I mean, did that come like, were you totally unaware, or was like, oh my God, you were hit by a truck, or was it when you heard the message, oh my God, that explains this and this, and I sort of saw it coming?
When you have trust with someone that's undeniable, and you have this you feel like you have this amazing marriage that's going to last forever. Now, we had our ups and downs, but like all marriages have, but not, there was never infidelity or anything like that. And when I heard the answer machine and realized that, you know, obviously there's another man in her life, it broke my heart. It just, I knew it would destroy our family that we had. And uh, it was heartbreaking. I mean, I can only say it like that. And anyone that's hearing me say this, and that's gone through it, know exactly what I went through, or what I felt like when you find out someone that you love. And we were married for 10 years at the time, and thinking you're going to be with this person forever, and supporting her while she goes back to a place that I was petrified of her going back, thinking someone's going to hurt her for all the things that
Yeah.
were said. She was on all the talk shows, and being on Jay Leno and Inside Edition and TMZ and all these shows that she would talk about, and I'm thinking, there's no way they're going to have you come back. I said, they'll kill you. Don't go back. And she says, I already talked to Vince. And I was heartbroken. Like, just, what do you mean you talked to him? And she was, I called him. And the deal was she could go back, but she had apologized to, some of the top talent that were really bothered by her coming back. And she did that. And then so I supported her, and we'd have our friends over for like Monday Night Raw to watch my wife on television, and excited for her that she was going to go back to something she loved doing. She just missed the limelight, I guess, and wanted to go back. I had no desire to go back. At that time I was 40 years old at the time, and didn't want to go back to wrestling.
As we wind this down, you've been very gracious with your time. I was so happy to read that the Marvelous nickname did come from Marvin Hagler. I kind of always wondered about that, as I'm a big boxing fan myself. But you kind of are in WWE or WWF at the time when they are at the apex of popularity and pop culture. And so on one end, the company itself is taking off and it's going nuts. But on the other end, your career is kind of going in the reverse. And what was the locker room like? Because I imagine there were other people like you whose maybe their rise wasn't happening as the company and as Vince McMahon and Steve Austin and The Rock and those guys are taking off. Like, were people conflicted? Like, what could that possibly be when, the popularity is over the moon, and yet singularly, maybe your career is not as over the moon?
I mean, obviously, I won't lie, it was very disappointing. Very, I felt just underwhelmed, but the blessing was I was making this huge guaranteed contract money. And whether I win or lose, I'm still making the same thing. I'm getting the same paycheck every week. And then there probably ain't nothing happening in matches. But, I guess the fun part was being the heel and going through the stuff I went through with Sable, always trying to demean her, and then her always being one up on me, was a lot of fun. I had a great time planning all that stuff out on how to get her over more and more, because hey, we're in the same house. They're backing up the Brinks truck to our house. Like, her merchandise is selling second to Steve Austin, So you want to support her, and because I'm going to make the same no matter what, but let's get her over the best we can. And of course, allowing her to power bomb me took me out of the main event match with Stone Cold Steve Austin. That was all set up for Anaheim, California. I remember getting to the arena, and they took me off the main event, and I didn't understand why. I go, what? Why? I was going to have a run with Steve Austin, the top guy in our. And later on, finding out that's because I allowed her to Sable bomb me. And Steve thought, and I certainly I've done his podcast since then, and certainly understand that, why would I even have a chance against Stone Cold Steve Austin when I can't even, beat a woman? So that was a disappointing time too.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
No, go ahead, Dave.
When we talk about that period and everything like that, she was in a unique situation because, like you said, like from a TV rating standpoint, I mean, her quarter hours were moving, numbers really big. I used to track that, and obviously, one of the more popular, top tier popular, for people who don't know, top tier popular characters during that window. And making a lot of money, but still, you had and I don't know if this had to do with the later lawsuit, but I mean, it's a weird thing because the nature of the wrestling business, it was a male dominated business, and women were looked on as sideshow, and her getting over that much shocked everyone probably, but at the same time, it's like they never paid her like Steve Austin was paid, even though I'm sure she made a lot of money, because women were never paid commensurate with men because it's a man's business. And Steve was a great worker, and Sable was an attraction or whatever it was. But I mean, and China went through the same thing when she was very, very popular, and she wanted to make what the top men made. And it was one of those things where she's a woman. How can a woman make what a main event guy makes? Even though, we could look at from a rating standpoint, from a popularity standpoint, you can make the argument that she was a top guy too. You know what I mean? I mean, and did that ever come up? And what was your mentality like during that period?
Well, I guess the other side of it is that she was doing a lot of stuff that they allowed her to do outside of wrestling, where she made really good money.
Right. That's true too. Yeah.
Obviously, the Playboy, she made over $1 million with those. I mean, she did 4 covers for Playboy, and she was paid a lot of money for that. And so those are things that WWF allowed her to do. So even though she maybe not got that big salary like a Steve Austin or someone, she was still getting paid very well.
Yeah.
All right, Mark. Thanks for all of your time, and now is a chance to tell people where they can find the book and anything else that you want to talk about before we get out of here.
Oh, thank you, guys. I appreciate being on today. The book is called Bad Too Good, and it's a real inspirational book. A lot of wrestling stories, a lot of things that people would never know about me that I shared that are a little, like, holy cow, I can't believe you did that. But I think you'll enjoy the book. But most of all, I hope you get something out of the book that really inspires you to go after your dreams and goals. As adults, we often become complacent in life, and one day becomes the next, and we settle for the status quo. We say, those were the days. I'm here to tell you these are the days. These are the days we learn from past mistakes. We grow in grace and knowledge. You can accomplish anything you set your mind to. Go out there and do something special, but do something special for someone, because in doing that, you'll do something special for you. Thank you, guys. You can get the book on Amazon, amazon.com. Get the book, Bad to Good.